Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everybody, from wherever you are tuning in. We'll just give a couple of minutes before people log in, and then we will commence this webinar and discussion. Thank you, everybody. Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to all of our panelists and hosts and attendees tuning in from Australia and the rest of the world. It's great to be here with you all. My name is Jae Yung Lo. I am the Director of the Centre for Asian Australian Leadership at the Australian National University. And together with Scalare Partners, it is a real honour and a privilege to welcome you all to certainly our final event of 2021 and an important conversation and topic at that in elevating diversity within entrepreneurship. So before I begin, I would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which I am zooming in from, and that is the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation. I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and acknowledge any traditional owners and leaders who are within this call as well. Before we begin, I just wanted to give a bit of some framing sort of remarks over how this event came to be. I have to give props to and a shout out to LinkedIn for this, because Jenny Lee, partner at Scalare Partners, and I connected on LinkedIn and through our shared experiences over the experiences of culturally, linguistically diverse founders and entrepreneurs, Asian Australian founders and entrepreneurs, and also their experiences in the entrepreneurship space, but also working in the VC space, investment space, and looking at some of the barriers, the challenges and the obstacles. And we thought, what a great way to combine our visions and our objectives together in the one by hosting this interactive conversation with a stellar list of panelists from Australia, in the region and around the world, and also moderated by someone who I have a deep, profound respect for in Geraldine Chinmoody. Thank you very much, Geraldine, for moderating this session. But before I hand over to Geraldine, just a quick introduction about Geraldine. She is the co-founder and executive director of 5H Values Capital, a non-executive director of Future Super, and an advisory board member of CAAL, the Centre for Asian Australian Leadership. And we're absolutely thrilled to have Geraldine moderate this session. And I am looking forward to hearing the stories, the experiences, and the journeys of each of our panelists about this important topic. And I look forward to your questions and your contribution throughout the discussion as well. Over to you, Geraldine.
Fantastic. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd also like to pay my respects to the Turrbal people, the traditional owners of the land on which I join you from today here in sunny Brisbane, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, emerging leaders, and also pay my respects to any Indigenous team members that are joining us today. It's a great honour to be hosting this panel, and we really thank you for taking the time to join us at this very busy time of year. We're hoping that we can leave you with some great stories from each of our panelists about their journey and some tips for you. But we also really want to hear your questions. We want to make sure that we're covering the things that are most important to you. So you'll see, and I'm sure we're all very familiar with these Q&A online panels now, but you'll see there's a Q&A section in Zoom. I really invite you to put any question that you'd love to hear from any of our panelists into the Q&A. You can also upvote any questions. So if you see a question in there that you really like and you'd like to make sure that I ask, please upvote that, and that'll go to the top of the list. And we'll be taking questions throughout the panel. So I hope we'll start to see some questions in there from you, because that helps us to make sure we're covering the things that are really important to you. Having cultural diversity, having gender diversity, having a wide range of diversity in our ecosystem, in leadership roles across our country, within our entrepreneurial community, across all of our institutions is so fundamental. And it's a great honour to be joined by 4 terrific leaders who are doing that around the world at the moment. So without any further ado, I'm going to go to each of our panellists. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, tell them a bit about tell you a bit about their journey to being where they are today, and then we'll go into some questions from you as well. So Ivy Robinson, she's the co-founder of Catalyzer, and she's going to kick us off.
Thanks, Jerry. And look, thank you to ANU and Scalare for having me today. As Jerry said, I'm Ivy Robinson, co-founder of Catalyzer. We're a social impact tech business. And so what we do is we help companies run their corporate social responsibility programs that feed into their ESG reporting. And we also help companies engage their employees in purpose-driven activities. My co-founder is Angela Kwan, and we're both minority women. We founded Catalyzer to solve a specific business problem, but in doing so, we really embraced the opportunity to create the business that we as professional women always wanted to work for. At the heart of that was diversity and inclusion right from the get-go. Currently, we have 65% female representation and 85% minority representation in our team. And as a leader, I've been very deliberate in building the diversity in our team, and that's because the business benefits of diversity for us are very real. Diversity makes us a stronger team. It makes us a more creative team, and I believe it keeps us innovative. And the areas I'm particularly interested in this space through my experiences are the importance of mentoring and support networks. I can't overstate that enough. The benefits of the cognitive diversity that diversity across all characteristics brings. And for me, the opportunities within entrepreneurship that I see to advance the diversity story. I think we have a lot of opportunities that we can take on ourselves to see that change. And so I'm looking forward to exploring some of these topics with you in the panel today. So looking forward to your questions. Thanks.
Thank you. We're now going to go to Jenny Lee, who's a partner at Scalare Partners and one of our co-hosts for today's amazing session.
Thanks, Jerry. Really appreciate the opportunity. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Lee. First of all, I'm really grateful for you giving us the time today to hear our stories. And inclusion and diversity has a special place in my heart. Maybe a bit of background of myself. I was born in China. My parents sent me to Australia when I was at the age of 16, left home for the very first time. Back then, I had this big dream about building my life in a brand new environment, passionate, excited. But it didn't take me long to realize every new beginning comes with new challenges. I was struggling, passing my year 10 exams because of language barrier. I really didn't have time to hang out with my new friends during the weekend because, like many other overseas students back then, we had to work quite hard to really, not just to gain work experience, but really get some money to partially pay for my own tuition fees. And over the last 20 years or so, I have been told a number of times, go back to your countries, you're simply not good enough. But I'm very proud, here I am today. I love calling Australia home. And over the last 10, 15 years or so, I've worked with remarkable leaders to grow a small company, from one country to over 6 countries in APAC. And I really consider myself to be extremely lucky because I have a network of amazing friends and family, peers, mentors, leaders who really inspire, encourage, and empower me along this journey. And today I am a partner of Scalare Partners. We have this community that funds and supports early stage technology business in and outside Australia. So I really see this as an opportunity to give back. And as Scalare, we are playing our part to really promote inclusion, cultural diversity, and gender balance within technology entrepreneurship. We have invested in companies in Australia, in UK, in US, in Singapore, and China, and working with many sophisticated investors, founders, and advisors within our community. I really enjoy and having fun learning every single day. And they taught me that despite your gender, your cultural background, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to really fulfill your dream. So that's a little bit about me, a little bit about Scalare, what we do. Really keen to hear the stories from other panelists and really keen to hear your question as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. Ely, we're going to go to you. So Ely joins us from Singapore today, where she's the head of global partnerships for Asia Verify.
Thanks, Geraldine. Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here today with all the wonderful panelists here. My name is Ely. I'm the head of global partnership at Asia Verify. So Asia Verify is a regulatory technology company based in Singapore. We are a baby company. We are 2-year-old. We are young. We are energetic, and we have been helping a lot of clients from many different culture and countries around the world with our, creative and innovative technology and solutions to help them fight against fraud and help them with the compliance processes. So I'm really proud to be here and be part of Asia Verify, and we have also recently just received an award. It's a big recognition from Regulation Asia to recognize our solutions, and one of the comments from the judges was that I think this is relevant to inclusion as well. So our solution actually solves problems not just for huge corporations. I personally believe risk management should be for all businesses, regardless of size, regardless whether you are a startup, a 1-year-old startup, or you are a multinational companies with 2,000 employees. You deserve to have the options to manage your risk with technology solutions at reasonable prices. Yeah, and this is what we do at Asia Verify. A little bit about myself. Other than my role at Asia Verify, I'm also the current subcommittee at Singapore FinTech Association. So we have a subcommittee called Women in FinTech, and our mission is to create this platform. It's a safe environment and community to empower, encourage, and inspire more women to join the FinTech and tech industry. And I personally really passionate about this because I had the experience myself moving from a non-tech career into now a RegTech company and experience the exponential growth. I think a big part of it, it's because we encourage the diversity and inclusion in our team. So we have people from different cultural background. We all work together to create amazing solutions regardless of age, gender, race, and your cultural background. And I myself benefited from it. I've learned so much in my career from my mentors from different cultural background as well. So that's part of the reason why I joined the committee at Women in FinTech. I just want to contribute my time and effort to pay it forward. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Neil, over
Yes.
to you. You're joining us from the United States. And
that's right.
As you introduce yourself, I'd also be interested if you could share any thoughts about any of the differences that you see around cultural diversity and leadership between Australia and the US.
100%. I'll weave that in. Yeah, my name is Neil Yeo. I'm the CEO and founder of 1.5. We are basically trying to democratize access to experts to accelerate solutions in climate change. And the reason why I'm doing this work up here in the States, it's actually very much started off in Australia. So I actually originally was born in Adelaide in South Australia to first-generation immigrant parents from Malaysia and from Hong Kong. My mum was a refugee, fled China during the Cultural Revolution to Hong Kong as a refugee, and brought us up with values of multiculturalness. It was a great upbringing, and I think Australia is such a beautiful country, allows for such creativity and thought. But I definitely felt the difference of being Asian when I was growing up, whether it was just slide comments or just trying to figure out my belongingness. And through that struggle, basically, Mum convinced me to go to Xi'an, China during my high school to go try to learn Mandarin. I ended up learning Mandarin. I know Mandarin and Cantonese actually in the conversational level because it's a key to culture, and experience air pollution during that time where Asia was just really booming, but people weren't really giving the basic right to fresh air. And so I was kind of stuck on this conviction where I felt Australia was home for me, but also this is where my people were. And it wasn't until I met multicultural people, especially in the States, where they were just so confident in themselves. I guess they had a couple of generations ahead of us, and they were really proud of their Asian heritage as much as their US heritage, that it just kind of dawned on me. And actually, I think I saw a friend in the chat here, but I came back to Australia after a 2-week trip to Hong Kong and had like an American accent, and remember my friends just paying me out. But what I realized there is that, we have power, both as multicultural, as Asians and Australians, and that's what makes us kind of powerful. And that's where I landed on my startup purpose, which was, if people don't have the basic right to fresh air, yet, this is the industries that are generating, then what kind of ancestor do I want to be for my people? And that took me on the journey to switch from what I was doing, mechatronic engineering and management consulting, to actually switching to climate change work. And throughout my career of management consulting to impact investing, and when I did my MBA at Oxford, it really took me to Kenya to work in off-grid solar and agri-tech, and just saw how technology and innovation can just step change. Like, we don't need these industries that were built off fossil fuels. We can actually step change it. That when I got to the States working in venture philanthropy, we really started to fund climate change solutions. And I just saw all the barriers to these new technologies going from the lab to the marketplace. And I thought, what could we do to solve that, including setting up pilot contracts, to helping industries understand the technology, to creating market entry or commercialization. And so my mentor in the States said, I was complaining, as I think it's easier to complain and talk a lot. And he said, what are you going to do about it? And I honestly didn't anticipate to be an entrepreneur, but when there is a challenge that's so deeply rooted in a cultural purpose, or a purpose of why you wake up to do what you do, and linked to something that you're uniquely positioned to solve for, and you have the capability, then you should go for it. And that's why I decided to spend at least 3 years, it's going to be more than that, to step on the front lines and help. And that was the essence of 1.5.
Fantastic. And I think, I'd love to come to this theme of how Australia's going in terms of supporting people from culturally diverse backgrounds to come through the ranks in leadership and to build their own businesses. And maybe we can come back to that question about comparing that across Australia and the US and Singapore and other areas. So does anyone want to kick off on that? In terms of thinking about how we can ensure that we're getting more people like all of you leading businesses, being CEOs, founding businesses, advising businesses, investing in businesses. Do you have any thoughts from your time in your roles about how we could do that better as a country? Ivy, Jenny?
Sorry, Jerry. Yeah, sorry. I'll jump in.
Thank you.
So I think that the experiences, that I've personally had and that I've seen with other culturally diverse leaders in the Australian space, I think there are opportunities where we can really embrace the fact that the startup community in Australia is really growing. So we lead when it comes to innovation, agility, speed for products and solutions to commercial problems. But I think we can harness that innovation and speed to also progress this diversity and inclusion story. And I think what's very interesting, and Neil might have thoughts on this as well, is when we compare what's happening in, say, Silicon Valley as compared to what's happening in our mainstream boardrooms here in Australia. So, the most recent appointment was Parag Agrawal as the new chief executive of Twitter, but now we see culturally diverse leaders leading Google, Microsoft, Adobe, IBM. Most of these leaders have grown up in and been educated in India. Whereas when we look at what's happening in Australian boardrooms, we don't see the same. So the most recent report that I saw, which was the Watermark Board Diversity Index, shows that 90% of our boards are still made up of people from Anglo-Celtic backgrounds. Now, if we continue at the current slow pace of change, that report says it's going to take close to 20 years for Australian boardrooms to reflect our broader population. Now, we know there are a lot of structural systemic barriers that mainstream organizations feel. But this is where I think the exciting opportunity in entrepreneurship is that we can create our own businesses, we can create our own boardrooms, we can appoint our own board leaders, we can choose to work with the investors that we want to choose to work with. And I think then we can almost sidestep some of those systemic barriers and start to demonstrate and model the change that we want to see in mainstream. So I think that is a hugely exciting opportunity, Jerry, that we have in this growing startup space that we have in Australia.
Yeah, Ivy, you said it so well. I mean, literally, if I think about it, how would you get more entrepreneurs from Australia doing that? They need to have role models, at least people to look up to or to know that there's a possibility. And so for those that are pioneering and cracking into these first roles, or being someone that at least you can look up to, and I think this is where these kind of gatherings are really fantastic, because there is that tall poppy syndrome, which is a bit of a struggle in Australia, where you don't necessarily want to stand out, or you're always told to like slow down, where we need pioneers to sort of break through. And I've seen that in the States. So as soon as I landed here, and there's no reason why we can't have this in Australia, is that I would sit down with other Asian founders. In fact, I'm with a bunch of other Asian founders from Y Combinator and the likes, not to say that those need to be the types, but I sit down and I found my tribe, like literally people around my age level who are also diverse in their background, starting up and have probably on their second or third businesses. And so I can sit down and talk with them and relate from a cultural standpoint to know how they had to break through into this, as well as like learning from them, because a lot of like entrepreneurship is like the connections that you have, the mentorship and the wisdom that you gather. And I think it is possible for Australians. There's so many funding opportunities when I was working for Equine Green that Australia didn't know about, because it's a bit kind of isolated sometimes. That Equine Green funds climate change startups, but we only ever had 1 out of the 1,000 entrepreneurs, just because people didn't know to apply for it. And so I see that there is cultural, like cross-border collaborations that you can find your communities and tribes, but they also need to have guidance. And so I think these kind of talks are extremely important. How do we give back? In fact, honestly, I kind of ran away from Australia in some senses, because I couldn't find my tribe, and I found it here. But what am I going to do about it? I met, a bunch of Australians at the New York consulate who are just on O visas, phenomenal entrepreneurs. And I got to admit that we're just focused on a lot of times just doing our work here, but how are we sort of investing back into our community so that we can have cross-pollination across countries?
If I may just add to that a little bit, I think, to really create that overall environment, we really need to take in both sides. So we have people, like the group here today that starting up their own business, but we also have investors, for example, from a different lens, that they need to support this business through this whole growing and scaling process. And I must say that if I looked at Australia, I have definitely seen a lot more awareness and activities really supporting inclusion and diversity. I see a lot more investors start to see these two factors being, key driver and critical success factors that really boost innovation and unlock opportunities. And inclusion and diversity become one of the key criteria that investor looked at when they make the investment decision. So there's a whole bunch of benefits and why these things are important when it comes to making investment decision, which we can talk to in a second. But I just think that having that mutual support from entrepreneurship as well as investor really creates that overall environment to improve the current situation.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now we're starting to get some questions through, which is great. So I really encourage everyone in our audience to pop questions into the Q&A. So I'm going to start with the first question we've got in our Q&A, which is, do our panelists, and whoever would like to jump in, please do our panelists have any practical suggestions for how to become an entrepreneur?
Well, I would love to answer this, Joe. I mean, I don't necessarily have practical suggestions about how to become an entrepreneur, but I think that where you need to start is you need to be passionate about solving a problem. I mean, this is I think the crux of being an entrepreneur is that you're taking on incredible levels of risk, and that if you're going to do that, you need to be 100% behind the cause and the issue that you're providing a solution for. So that to me is something that's going to keep you going on days that are really difficult, you know, in the face of wild challenges like COVID, you know, those sort of things. I think that if you just at your core fundamentally believe that you have a solution to offer to help solve a problem, I think that is half the journey.
Well said, Amy. Sorry, Edie, I can just jump in for a second. And I think also surround yourself with really good advisors, even just right from the beginning, and keep in mind that you don't have to fight alone. In fact, you know, having those different perspectives, these different ideas, this network of support around you is very important. So yeah, so always bear that in mind when you choose your investor, when you choose, you know, your advisory board, when you choose your business partner. Consider the different skill sets, the different background, and yeah, I think that adds a lot of value to your journey.
Yeah, I actually wanted to add on something very similar to what Jenny shared, because I think, yes, the community and network and the support, it's incredibly important. Even though I'm not the founder of Asia Verify, but as a senior leaders, I think it's very important to have a team and a network of people with the entrepreneurial mindset. So entrepreneurial mindset, including, you know, the courage to say yes. Yeah, so I think many times, even in my day-to-day job, I encounter a lot of scenarios and chaos that I really don't have answer to it. But I think we just have to, if we have enough support and we equip ourselves with the knowledge, and we make sure we are in the right network, the supportive network, I think we feel safe to just say yes, take the first step. And I believe I've encountered this many times. So after I say yes, I think all the solutions will come to me, the support will come to me, and the problem will ultimately be solved. Yeah.
I would just quickly say that you hold us accountable. I mean, entrepreneurship is very much like a give-get thing. And I don't think any of us would say that we did anything that we've done today just on our own. And I really widely respect people who just reach out, like you ping someone that you see and you say, wow, I want to learn how they did it. Just give it a crack and actually ask them, because I'm sure that they received a lot of support. So I'd say that you'd hold us accountable and other mentors that you look up to who look like you, or even if they don't, you want to sort of follow their pathway, because that was actually ultimately what helped me throughout my journey.
Yeah. So for our audience there, you've got an open invitation to get in touch with any of the panelists if you feel that there's advice or support to get you started or on your journey. So thank you for that offer. We've got another, I really encourage people, pop those questions now into the Q&A that's on the Zoom. We've got another question here from the chat that I'm going to go to. So the question is, what are the panelists' thoughts on how startups with small teams can get focused on the equity agenda early on? So how do you get started with a small team in a startup with really standing up for some of these things we've been talking about from a diversity and equality perspective?
Jerry, I'd love to jump in here. So when we started Catalyzer, we, as I mentioned, sat down and said, well, what is the company that we want to work for? What does that look like? Shaped by a lot of the experiences that we'd had. So my co-founder and I, we worked across corporate, government, the UN, not-for-profit, lots of large and smaller organizations. What we created in the beginning was shaped by, you know, both positive experiences as well as something that Neil referred to, which is, you know, there are a lot of ceilings depending on how your level of minority or your level of marginalization, you know, you do face different types of challenges. And so that shaped everything we did. Something that we sought out very early, that's a very practical thing that I think small teams can do, is look for something look for a framework that will help you grow. For us, it was the B Corporation certification. We went after that very, very early on. And for those who aren't familiar, B Corporation is an external verifier, an external measure of how well your business performs against social, environmental, and governance indicators. It's growing by the day. It's becoming very ubiquitous. And, you know, more and more businesses are looking to balance that profit and purpose story. But what B Corp provides is a very, very practical and easy to follow framework. It also gives you a lot of guidance, a lot of best practice, so that you can start to build your policies, your practices, all the decisions you have to make as you're starting out as a new business within this framework. And we found it extremely helpful. Also, you know, you have to go back and get recertified every few years, and that makes you stay active in terms of improving your performance. You know, if you feel like you're doing well in one area, environmental or cultural diversity or any sort of diversity, when you go back for certification, you know, you're up for another assessment. And so how can you continue to build on the advances that you've made? So for us, that was a very, very practical, easy to follow guide. Also, their pricing structure is scaled. So as you're a small company, you know, the fees are very low, and as your revenue grows, then you pay according to a sliding scale. So I think like accessibility wise, it's very, very friendly to smaller businesses and teams.
Yeah, up here in the States, they actually have, and I think there's so many resources, so I'm happy to share. I got a list of about 4 things, just can't get off the top of my head, but bias training is actually extremely important. Just the acknowledgement that we do have biases, even as us as, you know, multicultural. For example, there was this exercise we did where they showed a bunch of insects, like a cockroach to like a bug, right? And they'd have the words like beautiful and ugly. There's already these psychological things that are embedded in us, even on race as well, about what we consider as beauty, what we don't consider as. And I think acknowledging that at points in time, like Ivy said, the constant reminder of that also allows you to find those triggers when they show up. Especially out of New York, we have like over 100 different countries represented. There are so many subtle ways that cultural things pop up that even I had troubles doing when I was managing the African American communities in my team, having difficulty really understanding the deep-rooted pain that they had that showed up in different ways. So I had to almost get re-educated on my front to do that. And how we did it for our team is we started from the beginning. Honestly, we didn't have, diversity is one of our values, but it wasn't there until like a year ago, because we just naturally baked it in. Like we have literally a Notion wiki that states down our philosophy, and diversity being so clear because climate change hits the most vulnerable communities. And unless we have those people having a voice, can we say that we actually change anything? And climate change is a very privileged space with a lot of just whiteness in it, because you have to like take care of everything else and then you want to take care of the world. And so we didn't even realize that in our network of over 60, we have people from all over Asia, Europe to Asia, in all walks of life. But that became almost important. When you're hiring for someone, I think more than 50% of the hiring is done before you actually bring that person in. From the first conversation that you have, they can see whether there is a priority on equity and diversity. And that's how the leader needs to show up, both equipped with a solid understanding that there are biases, but able to be able to hear the nicheness of what their cultural bringing, what their diversity that they're bringing in, and backed up by really solid, like, you know, onboarding that actually does kind of list it as an active verb, not just a physical word. I think diversity is a verb, not a noun.
Yeah, I would just add on a little bit to what Neil said. I think all changes in organizations starts with leaders. So and Asia Verify, we have a small team as well. I think the core team, the senior management team sharing the same vision is really, really important, because as the team grow, you know, we get more challenges and we caught up in, you know, our day-to-day tasks. But I think as long as the core team, the senior management teams are aligned with the vision and how we view this important topic, I think we are doing good. Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we're getting some other great questions in. So I'm going to go to one that's just been upvoted, which is how do we translate the progress being made on diversity in entrepreneurial space to more traditional institutions such as listed companies, politics, public service? And certainly this one close to my heart. I remember being, when I was an executive on an ASX company, being one of only, I think, 1 or 2% of executives in the top ASX 200 companies that was from a culturally diverse background. I think statistics might have moved slightly since then, but this is such a critical thing. So does anyone on our panel want to cover that question? What can we do to really translate some of the progress we're making in the entrepreneurial space into the bigger institutions?
Jerry, I'm happy to jump in here as well.
Thank you.
I think, look, I'm a big believer in the value of mentorship, and I think that is where we can cross that divide through those individual relationships and support networks. So throughout my career, I've been really fortunate to learn from a network of very strong female mentors. And historically, I've made a mistake in that I've limited myself by seeking out role models who are on the path that I want to take. But in recent years, I've been working with a much more diverse set of mentors and building my own support network with a lot more diversity built in. I'm now working very closely with people who don't look anything like me, and often, you know, perhaps even look like the people on the other side of the ceilings that we talked about earlier. And so having diversity within my own mentor network has taught me a couple of things. And I think this is, in answer to this question, where we can start to bridge that divide. I think what surprised me, I guess, is the power of that two-way learning for a mentor relationship. You know, I've always benefited from working with mentors, but what surprised me in recent years is the sheer impact that I've had on my mentors in terms of challenging their thought, their thinking, helping them to develop more understanding of the experience of being a culturally diverse founder or a female leader or whatever it is that, whatever shoes that, you know, I'm coming from. And so I think that it's very, very important for us to actively seek mentors who are different from us and to start having those conversations, because many of these mentors that are really always making themselves very accessible, happy to help, really interested in developing the startup space, supporting female leaders. They are in very influential roles in mainstream organizations, in institutions. And I think that if we put up our hands to work very closely with them, I think we can have that real benefit of that two-way learning. And I think in doing that, we're going to foster more understanding and appreciation and empathy that we need to see that change happen.
Anyone else got thoughts? Illy?
Yeah, I just want to, Ivy reminded me a very fascinating story that I heard recently. So one of my peers in the Women in FinTech committee group, she's involved in one of the mentorship program in Singapore here. So she shared with me that they have this mentorship program. So they open the registration for mentors and mentees to register themselves so that they can match. So they will fill in their interests and everything, and they will match the mentor and mentees. And what really surprised me is that I think the number of mentors sign up, it's like 2 or 3 times than the number of mentees. So I really want to encourage, you know, you guys to ask for support, ask for help, because there are a lot of people out there who are very happy to offer their advice or share their experience with you. Yeah, so just get yourself into the right environment, in the right network, and plenty of resources and advices there.
Yeah, and try not to reinvent the wheel. I think very entrepreneurial. So if you're working for a big organization, I would say try to be entrepreneurial in that look up the policies, actually look up the diversity policies, because I'm sure for a fact that if there's something missing, you should raise your hand and say, hey, why isn't there something written here about X or Y, about culture? Why is this just about this? Or where does this land? Because as a startup, we constantly go back to our cultural manual because it's core crux. Like, people will come and join us because of the culture of the organization, because our brand is still getting built. And from moving from a KPMG Accenture of the world in Australia to now my own startup, I realized how much I just de-emphasized. Like I didn't even think about the policies or the values after I got hired at these big firms. I can never question them, but they showed up in very subtle ways where it just didn't show up like the company was really reflecting diversity, but I never did anything about it. Like I didn't even know where the diversity or if there was one, and I never raised my voice. And I think especially as Asians, when we're kept in a more submissive culture, like I would almost challenge yourself as a first step, especially also if you're interested in entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a lot about challenging. So if you are trying to solve a problem inside, I would find the policies and say what's different. And then the flip side is not reinventing the wheel. I think there's a lot already out there. I mean, I was looking at resources just on the talk. There's a bunch of resources from the US where we can almost bring in, like, even if they're like, we don't have one, what would you say? We're entrepreneurs. We normally then find, what is the other framework out there that we can actually bring in and insert, and even bring in those trainers and those experts and into workshops and things. So I would almost start internally within an organization and do the challenging right there from there.
Really well said. Actually, at the Neil's point, if you can find a way to have your voice heard, let's not assume that your boss or your employer is always aware of the why. The why is important, and to remind them that it doesn't matter we are large organization or SME. Business are all tracing for profitability, performance, staff retention, lower turnover. A lot of this diversity, inclusion, and topics that we are covering today actually improve all those metrics. And so research continues to show that a diverse and inclusive workforce not only offer improved decision making, but it also really improve performance and profitability as well. So if you can get your voice heard, when you challenge those assumptions, make sure you help your peer, your boss to really understand the why, and that certainly play a part as well.
It's all fantastic advice, and I would absolutely echo that in terms of raising your voice. Speaking with your human resources department, speaking with your leaders, participating in surveys that get sent out. In large companies, they're often doing surveys. They're often providing ways that you can provide feedback and input. Use your voice through those channels, because people are actively looking for that feedback, and if they don't know how you're feeling about things, then it's hard for them to address it. And also share examples with them. So a lot of entrepreneurs are open sourcing policies. They're coming up with innovative policies, and I'd encourage all companies out there to do this. If you've got an innovative policy, if you're doing innovative work that you'd love others to do, share those policies, and then the big organisations can pick those up, and that changes the country for the better as well. So we've got another practical question in thinking about being an entrepreneur. If I can ask each of you to respond to this in terms of, what is your view about programs that are aimed at startups, such as the Canberra Innovation Network, which is the example that's given here? So are they worthwhile? So I don't know if anyone's got experience with the Canberra Innovation Network program, but maybe I can generalise the question as well and say, is it valuable to participate in startup centres, startup programs as you get started on your journey? Ivy, I know that you've been involved in a startup program, so perhaps you could share your experience with that.
Of course. I think they are definitely worthwhile when you're getting started, because, and to Neil's point earlier, the importance of a support network. Whilst no one has created your business before, there's many people that have created businesses before. So there's a lot of lessons to already learn. You don't have to find all those hurdles for the first time yourself. So I think there's definitely advice and support that you can access. I think though, my caution would be to balance the engagement you have with startup networks, support programs. There's so many options out there these days, with actually just building your business and finding that market fit. I think sometimes there's so much going on in the space, which is fantastic. So there's so many resources and events and networks to tap into, but I think that it can be a distraction at times. And I think sometimes it's really about just, trying to balance how much time you actually just need to sit down and build your business and concentrate on the problem that you're trying to solve. So yes, I guess my answer is absolutely. These networks, these resources, please tap into them, use them as you need, but also just be wary that it can be a distraction at times, and it can be quite time consuming actually, which takes you away from the very reason that you started your business in the first place.
Anyone else?
Be very clear on what you really need, like in terms of support. Do you need some tools to get you started? Do you need some funds to get you started? Do you need a one-on-one mentor that really come and speak to you, understand your very problem, work with you to address, to solve? So there are a few different options out there. So be clear on what you are asking for. And very selective in terms of finding the best solution for you to get you started. But if this is your very first time and starting a business, my recommendation is a really relevant program would be very beneficial, because it does give you some perspective, and because we don't know what we don't know, right? Sometimes hearing those advice out there is value add, but just be very clear of what you are looking for. Otherwise, it can take quite a bit of time, and I've also come across with people who got quite lost when they attend a couple of those programs and not really getting what they're looking for. So that clarity is quite important.
I just shot in. I'm always a resource person. You notice that a lot of entrepreneurs probably have a lot of links. I think part of the issue, and it happens up here in the States, is that a lot of the good programs or things, it's unless you're in that network or as you've heard someone that's had it, it's very hard to evaluate. So my suggestion with any program is to talk about the alumni. Like, I look immediately to alumni and reach out to them 100%. If you ask, if you don't ask, who knows? And that's something that I personally learned, is to just ask. And the worst thing is that they're going to say no. But as an entrepreneur, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you're going to have to take a lot of notes. So you might as well start practicing with looking into these programs. And I just made a couple of suggestions of programs that I think are really fantastic. And even this one Google Sheet link that I'm sure that Stanford doesn't mind me sharing, but literally the same issue happens up here, where people just don't know which programs are available for them or what grants are available for them, especially in social impact work. So there's been a lot of work in aggregating it. Even the Global Innovation Exchange, which isn't around anymore, that was funded by DFAT, was trying to also do this. So I would suggest both reaching out, and also know that there are fellowship programs that bridge Australia to international. And I would highly suggest those kind of cross-pollinations, because you will learn a lot from diversity outside of Australian thinking that would allow you to innovate within Australia. It's just the fact, I think a lot of the times Australians just don't know. I was trying to push so many things down to Australia and having no channels to send it to. But I would highly recommend a really good kind of incubator program that can help you test a thought in a safe environment, so that you don't have to quit your job or drop out of school. Like, you can have a good education and also start a business. But finding that right community and the right training there's no brainer. But yes, there's quality control on the types of programs that you do run. So I would always reach out to alumni, regard them, say, was it worth your time?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of the programs also have information sessions that you can get along to, you can learn about it. And I would definitely echo that in terms of time commitment, like really understanding what the time commitment is, and making sure that matches where you're at in your cycle. So one of the programs that I'm involved with, which is the Seattle Angel Conference, because I was living in Seattle until last year, is a very intensive program, but it's very hands-on, and you get to pitch your company, and you get lots of feedback, and you get lots of advice, and you get a go at doing a due diligence process. And coming out of that, companies have a data room that they can then use, and it's done in a very learning and collaborative way, but it's a very big time commitment. And so it's only one that, you want to go down that path if you've got that, if that's your priority in where you're at with your business and your funding cycle at the moment. But I would definitely echo that. Looking around the world, there's programs here in Australia, but there's also some terrific programs overseas. Which brings me to another question that I've just received on the chat, which is again bridging the US and Australia. So see if anyone wants to take this question. So it's quite a specific question. So in the US, we've seen a trend where there's some venture capital and investment firms that have been set up by Asian American investors to specifically support Asian American entrepreneurs and their businesses. And the question is, does anyone on the panel have a view of whether that would be a good concept to adopt in Australia? Anyone got a thought on that?
I would love to see that. Oh my gosh, like there is such a strong community out here and there's no reason why we can't have it. And I'd love to sort of create that, throw it out as a challenge. Like, would someone sort of start that? Because I think I would love to support that. There's an Asian Hustle Network up here and there's a huge conglomerate. You can follow them on Instagram, but they're constantly pushing. Actually, they pushed an Australian founder, Slopo, I think Shopo. There was like Shopo, that the fashion industry that got bootstrapped out of Sydney. They actually pushed her on the thing. So they're kind of agnostic to the barriers. So I would actually, I know my partner's actually on this call. She was interviewed by Asian Hustle Network as an Australian, well, no, sorry, an Asian founder. We could almost cross-pollinate. So if someone was actually interested to start that, we'd be happy to sort of connect the Asian community from the States to Australia, because I think it's an extremely needed thing. The community is supporting one another, but also with the care to not create isolation. I think we chat about this where we don't want to create a space where we're then just, being our own echo chambers and then also pushing other people out. So I think I'm also very careful about, just purely focusing on Asians, but thinking about diversity as a whole with multiple races in it, not just Asians as well.
Yeah, Neil, I love that too. I mean, I would be very excited to see that as well, but I feel particularly strongly that, the investment VC space has a lot to benefit from greater diversity within the mainstream space, as well as opposed to creating, like you said, Neil, like at the danger of creating our own echo chamber. I think that from my experience in working with investors and raising capital, I think there's a real opportunity, I think, for investment teams to increase the diversity that they have internally so that their in-house capability to support diverse founders is increased. And I think part of that is about challenging what our norm is about leadership. What traits do we expect from leaders? What style of leadership do we equate with success? And how do different VCs, whether they embrace that or whether they see that as an opportunity? I think there's a lot out there, and if they seek to build their pipeline with diverse founders, I think that that's also a sort of risk mitigation and diversification strategy for their portfolio, because they've got businesses being led by all sorts of different types of leaders who are approaching problem solving from all sorts of different perspectives. So whilst I would love to also see sort of Asian backed funding that we were talking about, I actually think there's a massive opportunity in the mainstream investment and VC space to increase both diversity internally within their teams, as well as to grow pipelines by actively seeking out diverse founders.
I definitely echo what Neil and Anne just said. At Scalare, I used in our company as a firm. So when I looked at our investment community, we actually quite diversified in terms of male-female ratio, as well as the different cultural background, and that really allowed us to bring in different opinion and idea and allow them to come to life. And we often challenge each other's assumptions. We often have very healthy debate, and we can see the outcomes of that activity and dialogue really drive better investment decisions. And we looked at our investment portfolio, all the founders that we back, they also come from many different backgrounds as well, and from risk mitigation, from an innovation angle, we as an investor, we really benefit from that mix. That being said, if I look at it a little broader system, we have seen a lot more communities actually around us start to promote, that sort of inclusion and diversity. You have programs like FDE, you have, F2F, you name a few, Heads Over Heel. There are a few more companies and communities out there that is really promoting this particularly around the gender balance, because technology entrepreneurship, there's always this perception that is more male dominant, that we really start to see a lot of activities that driving that change, and that comes again from the investor as well as the founder. So it really both parts plays an important role here. But yeah, coming back to Scalare, we certainly benefit from having that diversified mix of groups when it comes to making investment decisions as well as supporting our portfolio.
As I heard the keywords risk mitigation, I just have to jump in because we are a RegTech company, right? So I just have to say something when people talk about risk. So I think one of the reason why Asia Verify, so you see our name is Asia Verify, we are serving clients around the world. So one of the reasons why, this is feedback from our clients, so one of the reasons why they come to us, they come to Asia Verify to help them do business safely in Asia and not to other companies, even though we are so young and we are really new. One of the main reasons is they find it very easy to communicate with us because we have a diverse team with different cultural background. So our clients, they are from different cultural background as well, especially clients from the West. They really had no clue on how to do risk management in Asia when they expand their business to Asia. So we kind of because we have a diverse team, we kind of help them to close the gap. It's not perfect, but I think we are doing pretty well in this, and this is kind of I wouldn't say surprise, but I think it's definitely a brownie point on top of course very good technology solutions. When you have a diverse team, your business and your team can just go way beyond the expectation.
Absolutely. So we've touched on this a little bit, but I want to just draw particularly to Ivy, Ely and Jenny on the intersectionality between being an entrepreneur from a minority background in terms of culture and ethnicity, but also being female we've talked about it being a more male dominated environment in terms of entrepreneurs and VC. Do you have any thoughts about that, or any learnings or lessons that you'd like to share with the group? And Neil, feel free to jump in as well if you have any comments on this, but we'll go to Ivy, Ely and Jenny first.
Sure. My experience has actually been that there is a lot of support out there to access Geraldine. Like, I find that there are, particularly in the last couple of years, as Jenny mentioned, there are networks looking to actively promote women and to address the imbalance. We've all heard the statistics about, how much funding goes to female-led businesses and the inequality that exists. But I've personally experienced that in reaction to that, there has been this sort of flooding of opportunities where we can choose to tap into, whether that's advice, whether that is, applying for different grants that are specifically geared towards supporting female-led businesses. Obviously, there's still a bit of an uphill climb, Jerry. Like, I think you're coming from a lot of positions of disadvantage. But I think at the end of the day, what I do like, and I think I mentioned it before, what I do love about the startup space is that there's a fundamental meritocracy where if you can solve a problem and prove that your solution is the best, you know, you can really challenge a lot of the stereotypes and norms that perhaps would be harder to challenge in mainstream institutions or the corporate world. So I think that there is actually a lot of opportunity there for women, even though I think we're all aware in this room and attendees on the session that, you know, layers of disadvantage, whether you're Indigenous and Torres Strait, or whether you're, you know, from cultural diverse backgrounds, or whether you're, you know, it might be that you're really young or much older, you know, you just diversity across all facets of the spectrum. If you're not in that mainstream, then you do face a bit of an uphill climb. But my personal experience is that the ecosystem is improving in terms of support and resources.
Yeah, I can share a little bit about my experience in the Women in FinTech Committee for Singapore FinTech Association. So according to statistics, I think currently, not too sure about Australia, but in Singapore and Southeast Asia, we only have less than 30% of women in the FinTech space. And just imagine in the leadership position, it's even lower. And when we have you know, our networking session, brainstorming discussion, this talent pool topic always come up. And actually, in reality, I think this is one of the things that people don't mention often. So it's not that the company don't want to hire female or maybe very young people or people with different races. It's part of the reason is because as women, we tend to undervalue ourselves very often. So we need to feel a lot more certain and safe before we speak up or before we make the first move. So I think joining community and network like Women in FinTech, it's having this initiative like this is really, really important because it creates a safe space for women to have their voices there. This is that there's no right or wrong, but it's just the nature, you know, the difference between men and women. So men, when they think about something, they will just say it and they'll just do it. But for women, most women, they need to see someone else did that first and they follow the path. So I think as senior business leader, it's very close to my heart, and I think it's very important to be the voice, and what we can do in our power is to create the path, open doors for people. And I really hope through this we can encourage more women joining the industry, especially young women, in order to, you know, do better in diversity in the bigger ecosystem in the long run.
So one last point from me to add, our next generation is very important as we move on. I think, you know, reflecting on two of the programs that I recently participated, really spending the time with our high school students, university students, it is really proud and amazed to hear, you know, this group of female students, they have big dreams about their futures and they're not really, you know, framed in a particular direction that I can only do this, but I can't do that. So coming back to, you know, each of us, doesn't matter, you know, we are men, we're women, but, you know, when we talk to our next generation, when we talk to our friends, kids, you know, always encourage them to really think, you know, outside that traditional box, and you have no idea, you know, how powerful and influential you can be if you share your own experience, and that, you know, our next generation will really take in, and you know, over time, I'm very confident that we can see that change, because I certainly hear the hunger and the passion from our younger generation, and they are our future.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, we've talked about a lot of topics today, and whether in our audience you're thinking of starting a business, whether you're working within a startup or running one, or working as an investor, I think that we've heard lots of lessons today about, you know, finding a problem and solving it, making sure you've found your support networks, saying yes, raising your voice, making sure you're looking out for mentors and role models, and being the change that you want to see in the world. I wanted to go to each of our panelists and see if, in addition to some of those themes, if each of you could give us your thoughts about the tips, and like the top 3 tips that you would give to our audience based on your experience in your career so far. So Jenny, did you want to start?
Yeah, happy to, thank you. So I think inclusion and diversity, they're both very big topics, but when it comes down to day-to-day, it takes a lot of practice. I often hear early stage small companies, probably it's a team of 2 or 3 people, they all come from same background, same gender. When is the right time to start that journey? I often hear questions like that. So I think when it comes to inclusion, trying to jump out of that, it doesn't necessarily have to be, gender or culture, even wear different hats. If you have a meeting with your business partner about making an important business decision, always invite a client in the room, for example, or even, wear their hat, include different stakeholders, into this whole business making process, consider the impact that it will create to, your partner, your clients, your employees, and really practice that on a day-to-day basis. And as you grow, because really that is the beginning of your journey, as you grow bigger, when you hire more people, if this already become your daily habit, that's the way you think, the mindset that you operate, then it makes it easier to really introduce, that inclusion and diversity, and as you grow your business. So that's one thing that I want to send a message out there. It doesn't have to be, when you have a team of 10, or when you have people from 2 different places. That's when you start. You can always start as early as you can to really bake it into your daily operation, and start to benefit from having that inclusive and diversified workforce or mindset.
Yeah, I've definitely got one phrase there, which is you're a subject of your environment, whether consciously or subconsciously, and that includes the people that you surround yourself with. And so if I had a really strong suggestion for people who are looking for a further passion to like break out, do their own thing, or do something more mission driven, I would honestly do what Australians do fantastically, which is drink coffee, or at least if you're not a coffee drinker, a tea drinker, but honestly reach out to people through LinkedIn. Or this is literally how I did it in Sydney, was that I was interested in social impact. I was working at KPMG. I felt stuck in my management consulting role in an ivory tower, and I had 0 friends around me who were kind of doing social entrepreneurship. So I started with a center of social innovation, and my friend was working there, and I said, hey, can I talk to you about my interest in this? And we finished the coffee, and then I said to her, like, that I'm searching for my passion. I want to do impact using business. And she's like, you should talk to me. I'll finish the conversation. I said, do you know 2 or 3 people that you could connect with now you've heard my story, that could use my skill sets, or that I could go? And then I ended up talking to the head of CSI, who then introduced me to Lisa George, who's also really prominent in Sydney. And she talked to me about diversity and working through a lifestyle of impact. And bit by bit, it kind of opened up more and more. And then my environment was surrounded by people who were living the change that I wanted to live. And I think that's something that I mistakenly just took so long, because I just talk and complain to my friends about just struggling, but I wasn't doing anything about it. And it can take just a simple coffee, a simple ask for a coffee chat, that could really break through. In fact, it was the reason why I ended up at Oxford doing my MBA, because I taught to Hello Sunday Morning. I think the Alcohol Anonymous by Chris Rain. He is an Oxford alum, and I got connected through the CSI network to talk to him. And he was the first person I chatted to who I was just like, wow, like he's doing social entrepreneurship and it's possible as an Australian. And that took me then to apply. And so hearing it straight from the people's mouth, the people who've kind of gone through the journey, is like as simple as a coffee. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah, and just before I go to Ivy and Ely, I'd echo that in terms of the coffee, but also I think since we've had 2 years of a lot of online catch-ups, having a coffee Zoom has become a thing too. And so there's sort of an opportunity to actually connect with people across different countries and across different cities, which we didn't have before, to invite someone to do a quick, you know, if you can't do it in person or you're not traveling, do a quick coffee Zoom, just schedule a 30 minutes and you know, have a cup of tea, and that's a way to kind of connect and have a more informal discussion with someone. So I'd encourage you to use the opportunity that's opened up in terms of accessing people across different cities and different countries for those Zoom coffees as well. So Ivy and Ely, over to you for your thoughts.
Sure. So I guess as a final thought, Jerry, what I'd love to say is, if you are a diverse leader or a diverse team, go ahead and lean into your comparative advantage. So know what makes you different and actually understand how that can make you a smarter business, a smarter competitor in the market. So how can you use your difference as a comparative advantage? And I think that is hugely empowering when you're coming from any of those diverse characteristics that we've talked about today. We've covered such a broad range. And I think really important part of that is challenging the kind of cultural blindness that we have to leadership, that leadership has to look like a particular thing that we've all seen. It absolutely doesn't. And I think that, challenge comes when we try and emulate something. But I think, to my point about trying to understand what makes you different and how you can leverage that in your business or in the market is a hugely empowering lesson that I've learned, and I think a really important takeaway that I'd love to leave with the audience.
Yeah, from me, I think it's really important to have an open mind. And I myself, I'm a very introverted person. I think Jenny knows that. she knows me for years. I'm a very introverted person. It's not easy for me to, put myself in like an event like this. But what I learned from in my career and for the past many years of experience, I think once you really open up, you have an open mind, all the resources and information and help are out there. All you have to do is really just to raise your hand, and people will see you and they will come to you. Yeah, so just take the courage and raise your hand and start with small steps. We don't have to do something big right from the beginning, and we'll make mistakes along the way. But just take the courage to make the first move, and we go step by step. Yeah.
That is wonderful advice. And I think that's an amazing place for us to leave you today. You'll look in the chat, and I'll give you a few minutes just to grab any links that you want to grab from the chat, because we've been putting in there a range of resources, but also the contact details to contact with each of our panelists today in terms of learning more about their companies or connecting with them, reaching out to them for any further insights or advice. I'd also like to draw your attention to the 40 Under 40 Asian Australian Leadership Awards. If you head to the website, you'll see a whole bunch of inspirational role models across all sectors who've come from an Asian Australian background, both in terms of looking at that for role models, but thinking about nominating yourself or nominating others for that when the nominations open next year. So it's a wonderful resource and a wonderful way of profiling our emerging leaders that are coming through as well. On that note, I would really love to thank all of our incredible panelists today. I've loved your humility that you've shared. I love that you've given us some really fantastic tips, both in terms of individuals' journey, but also thinking about the industries and our people with questions. Have all thanked you very much for answering their questions today. So to Ely, to Ivy, to Neil, and to Jenny, a big round of applause. Thank you. And for all of our audience members, thank you for joining us today. We know it's a busy end of year period. We hope that you found this really valuable. We will be sharing a recording of this early in the new year by email. to the address that you've registered. If you found it helpful and you think that others in your network would find it helpful, please do share it with others that you think will be beneficial, and we hope to continue to have these conversations. And just a final shout out to our co-hosts today, Scalare Partners and the ANU Centre for Asian Australian Leadership, for all of the work that you're doing around diversity, for convening us today and for bringing us together. We've very much appreciated that. So I'm wishing everybody a safe holiday season, and hope everyone gets a bit of a break at the end of this quite crazy year that we've had. So wishing you and your families all of the best. Thanks again. We'll sign off.